This boy lived through hundreds of reincarnations, and in his first life he entered the world of Murim, having learned martial techniques. But before he could use his sword, he was attacked by bandits and was tragically killed. However, the boy was born again, but now in another body, carrying the memories of his past life while borrowing the bodies of others, repeating his life, just taking advantage of the chance he was given, giving it his all. The young man believed it was an opportunity created by his relentless desire to live and to become the greatest under the heavens. An old man observes something in the distance while at the top of a mountain, and then he sees a butterfly, which lands between his fingers. The disheartened man says he was very exhausted. His life was repeated as many times as the fluttering of its wings, and it was tiring. There was nothing he hadn't achieved, for he had fulfilled his ambition to become the greatest under the heavens by ascending to the throne of the true Murim world. The butterfly that was between the man's fingers flies away, and at that moment, he didn't know if it was a joke. And then the butterfly leaves. As he closes his eyes, he thinks that he really needed to rest. At that instant, the man opens his eye, noticing that he was still alive. He realizes he was lying in bed and wonders what was happening. Trembling, the boy then realizes that he had reincarnated again into another body. Furious, he gets up from his bed, saying he wanted to stop reincarnating because he was tired of it. At the same moment, a woman takes his hand. With tears on her face, she asks him why he keeps saying such terrible things, and the boy wonders who that woman was. The memories of that body begin to resonate in his head. The woman asks the young man if he was okay. The boy observes the woman and remembers that she was his nanny in that body, and he saw her as his mother. However, next to the nanny was another man, and the protagonist thinks he saw him as his older brother. Looking in the mirror, he realizes the state that body was in and wonders if the cause of death was suicide. Regretful, he reflects on what he had just said because he had just woken up. He apologizes to the nanny and says he just had a nightmare. But the woman says that if the boy had a nightmare, he is not feeling well because he has been skipping meals for days, suggesting they call a doctor. However, the boy says he was fine and just needed to rest a bit. Worried, the nanny suggests he eat something, but the young man says he was not hungry and asks to be left alone, saying he needed to figure out what he would do with the rest of his life. The woman is surprised by what the boy had said, but the boy says he spoke wrong and that if another accident happened to him, the young man would be treated as crazy and asks the woman if he seemed like that. Then she observes the boy. Expressing her concern, she says that even his way of speaking was different. The boy realizes she was right and thinks he should correct it. Besides, he caused confusion as soon as he woke up, so he had nothing to say. The young man then smiles, saying he will go eat, promising that nothing will go wrong. His nanny hears what the boy said, and then she smiles, believing in the young man. The two then leave the protagonist's room, and his nanny says she will prepare his favorite food, suggesting to the boy that it was important to calm down, but the boy tells her not to worry. Then they leave his room. The boy lies down on his bed, thinking that it was not over yet, wondering why it had started again. So for several days, the boy relived the memories of that body, because his memories were intertwined with its memories. The original owner of this body is called Sik Jinho, who, despite his wealth, was a bastard son. In the face of the family's contempt for being an illegitimate child, it had no meaning. So the boy became pessimistic, gradually refusing his meals, spending his days in bed, as if he was waiting for death, and eventually disconnected from his life. It was at that moment where the protagonist takes over his body. Contempt from his family? He should just ignore it because he had two people who loved him more than anything. The man asked the boy why he went out in the cold wearing so little. The protagonist said is that if he put on more clothes, he would be rolling on the ground. Putting his hands on his shoulder, he suggests taking him to his room. At the same instant, his nanny realizes he was outside the house and says it was already late and very cold. The boy says he was so worried he didn't even notice it had gotten dark. Then the man picks him up. Taking him inside the house, she serves him a meal, and the young man asks why they were treating him like a child, but the woman tells him to complain when he is healthy. The protagonist wonders why the owner of that body would abandon those people and thinks he was an idiot. Ever since he reincarnated into the body of that boy, he says he has been in a state of contemplation. Thoughts he never had before, even living hundreds of lives, come to his mind. Maybe because he was accepting kindness that wasn't meant for him, or maybe there was nothing else he desired. He who fought for countless repeated lives didn't even want to understand the young man's choice. However, when he saw how they looked at that body, it was hard to pretend he didn't notice. So he asked the boy what he couldn't let go of even in death. The protagonist says that out of respect for the person who owned that body, he would use the rest of his spiritual power to transmit the will engraved in that body. But the vessel of the body was small because it seemed to have a will that he couldn't let go of. The boy says that as someone who subdued the Murim world, he finds him pathetic and says he will fulfill his wish. For the boy's will was to prove himself. So to fulfill his wish, the protagonist began his training because the presence of an exceptional martial fighter was crucial. And that's why the first martial art he will learn is the Taiji technique. It was an art of bodily refinement that would transform Sik Jinho's physique and serve as the foundation for the techniques he had learned throughout his lives. However, the process of altering the physique was painful, but without enduring the process, it would be impossible to master the divine art. The boy, suffering, thinks he knew it would be like this, but still it was unbearable, and feeling pain all over his body. It was just a little bit more. Sweat pouring from his face, he thinks he was almost there. Energy begins to appear between his fingers, forming a sphere of water. The young man thinks that for now it was good and the accumulation of energy was slow, but being able to gather energy in motion was already something good. Then someone calls him. His nanny says he was sweating in that cold. She hands a handkerchief to the boy, asking if he was okay and if he got hurt, and the boy asks if she thought he was in pain. The nanny says no, but exerting oneself suddenly can have serious consequences. The young man then smiles, saying it wasn't just any training because he was practicing martial arts, which leaves the woman confused, asking if he was training that. The boy confirms, saying he needed to get stronger to protect her, but she says she can take care of herself, telling the young man to stay healthy. However, the boy says it would be difficult because he had a favor to fulfill. The nanny wonders what this favor could be because the only people he knows are Yan and her. The protagonist says that if she sees Yan, to call him because he had something to teach him. But she, worried, observes the boy and thinks it wasn't the time to question and that she should trust because she had never seen the young master so convinced, thinking she will support him. The boy was training martial arts in the meantime, and it was Yan, the protagonist's brother, who was watching the boy train, saying his eyes weren't mistaken because he had the right physique to learn the iron defense technique. The boy then suggests they stop for the day, and Yan asks the young man if he did well and if he thought he got stronger. The protagonist puts his hand on his shoulder, saying it was far, but his progress was very fast. If he continued training, he would achieve success, and not even an external art could defeat him, so he asked him to try even harder. Yan says he couldn't believe he was striving for someone like him and says he would work hard to be useful. But the boy tells him not to worry because he was like his brother. The man is happy. With tears on his face, he hugs the protagonist, and the nanny arrives, offering them water. A voice tells them to hurry because they didn't know the guests would come tomorrow. The protagonist asks what was all that confusion, and the nanny says it was the elder's birthday celebration. He remembers something and says he had forgotten. The nanny asks the boy if he would be okay, and the young man is confused because he didn't know what it was. Then the woman says he would have to face his brothers and that it would be difficult for him. The boy asks why it would be difficult, and warns that those who should be worried were them. The nanny is confused about why it would be them, wondering how the young master had changed so much since his accident. Then she says that since he was so excited, she couldn't be left behind, saying she had already taken care of his present, so he could go without worries. The boy asks about the present and mentions that they were out of money, but the woman says not everything is bought with money and says the clothes he was wearing were made by her. The protagonist thinks that was surprising to see people love him, still follow him that way. Then the boy says that with the two of them, he was confident he would return peacefully. The nanny is happy, saying she heard that the figures from the 9 sects would be at the elder's birthday, and if he caught their attention, he would have a chance to become a disciple. The boy asked about this sect, but crossing his arms says it wasn't a big deal. Then comes the day of the elder's celebration. His nanny frantically gets him ready. The protagonist asks if she wasn't too excited, and she says she was because it was the day for him to show how much he had changed, saying he would surprise everyone. But the boy said, as she always said, he was the coolest, but Yun affirms that he had changed a lot, saying his eyes had become much more intense, and besides his physique getting better, he had become more confident. But the boy affirms he had to change because there were people who believe in him, saying that in his future, there would be many changes besides his appearance, and that today was his first step. The boy says he can't predict what will happen and asks if in the future the two will continue to follow him. With a smile, the two say yes, saying they will follow wherever he goes. Then they go to the celebration. Arriving at the place of celebration, people notice the protagonist, wondering why he was there because normally he would be locked in his room, and also that the boy seemed different. But could someone change so easily? The protagonist mentions that he can hear all these people talking about him, and Yin asks if he was okay, but the boy tells him not to worry. Someone approaches the young man saying that rumors about his change had spread and asks if it was true. This person observes the boy. The protagonist thinks this guy was Siak Manho. Then he says it was the elder's birthday, and there was no way he could stay locked in his room. The boy says he is very rude to be the 5th master of the family, insinuating that he, being the 4th master, was superior. But Siak says he had forgotten that his family was meritocratic. The protagonist says he was just a second-class warrior. However, the man mentions that being a second-class warrior at his age wasn't a bad thing because compared to him, who was lazy, he was doing his part. But the protagonist says he didn't know the difference between them two. Stick approached the boy aggressively, but the protagonist questioned if he really wanted to start a fight on such an important day, pointing out that many people were watching. He realized the young man was right, but Jinho said he would schedule a time for them to face each other the next day. Siak, with a look of hatred, told him not to run away. Jinho told him not to worry, thinking he needed a spark to show he had changed, saying Siak was a good choice because his reputation in the family wasn't bad. Moreover, there were still scores to settle. Arriving at the temple of celebration, Yun mentioned that the place was huge and seemed bigger than last year. They observed two men who were the 5 flowers of Murim and the representatives of the 10 major agencies of the Central Plains. It seems some had come from Jiangnan and MANHWA. The young man said they must be from a wealthy family, and Yan said this meant the elder held a high position. And with so many guests, they would have to wait in line. The protagonist said there was no way around it because talking about family ties implied direct descendants, but Yan mentioned he didn't mean that, yet the boy said he was just stating a fact. The young man said at least there was something interesting to pass the time. Yan asked if he was talking about Siak and how he felt intimidated by the younger generation, and even the other descendants must be in the same situation. The boy mentioned he was excited just a short time ago. However, 2 men observed the protagonist, saying he seemed very strong and that he was much better than most of the young generation. The protagonist noticed the 2 were watching and was confused. The 2 apologized, saying it wasn't their intention as it was instinct seeing his incredible physique. They asked if he was from the Siak family, wanting to know his name and several things about him. The boy then stated his name and that he was the 4th young master of the Siak family, and said there was no reason to answer the rest of the questions. The elder said they must not know who he was and asked them to inquire. Jinho said he knew who they were, the elders of the sect, asking if they were lost, mentioning he would ask a servant to guide them. The people around watched the conversation between them and asked if acting that way in front of the most important people was okay, and asked what was happening. The elder noticed the boy leaving, saying he would get straight to the point, calling him to his sect, as soon as he would be a first-rate martial artist, but the other elder also called him to his sect, asking if he had heard of it. However, the protagonist said he didn't want to join any, apologizing. But the elder said that training alone at some point he would encounter an obstacle, and if he went to his sect, he would personally help. But Jinho mentioned he wanted to master the martial art he was currently studying and asked them to stop because he wanted to see his grandfather. But the elder still insisted, telling him to wait. At that instant, he was surprised, as he noticed the boy had just dodged his hand. But the other said it was just a coincidence, and if it wasn't, then he would be the most powerful man under the sky in the future. However, it was a pity, because it had been a long time since he had seen so much talent, mentioning he wanted to ask the elder about him. Yin asked Jinho if everything was okay because they were elders of a great sect, but the boy told him not to worry because he wasn't their disciple. At the same instant, a man observed the protagonist, asking what he was doing there. The young man said he was waiting his turn, but his uncle asked if he was a stranger because he was in the guest line. His uncle called the boy, telling him to follow, and Jinho asked if they could see the elder now. His uncle said yes and asked if he knew he was also from a branch of the family. Then the young man thanked his uncle. The boy remembered that his uncle always ignored his greetings, but now he talks to him, and he thinks it was because the elders showed interest in him. Grinding his teeth in anger, he asked if it was worth talking to him now. They arrived before the elder, with a man saying he would withdraw. But the elder said there wasn't a useful person because even calling the elite descendants, they couldn't hide the fear they had of him. At the same instant, a guy said that Siak Mingwu and Siak Jinho had come to meet him, and the elder said to let them in. Before the elder, the protagonist's uncle said that Jinho wanted to show his respect, so he accompanied him. The boy bowed before the elder, wishing him a happy birthday, saying the nanny and Yan helped prepare that present for him, mentioning it wasn't anything extravagant, and he thinks normally they would say they were the ones who prepared it. But an elder said nothing was as valuable as sincerity, and perhaps that made it precious. He observed the clothes, saying it was amazing, and mentioned he had heard that the elders had shown interest in him, and the protagonist said it was true. The elder asked which of the two he was interested in joining, but the boy said he didn't want either of them, saying he had already warned the elders because his intention was to master the arts he was studying. The old man then laughed, asking if he had placed his ambitions in the martial world instead of the mundane, and the boy said things don't always go as planned. His grandfather asked if he needed his help, but Jinho said he didn't need it at the moment. The old man said he understood, saying they would talk about it another time, and the boy said he was already leaving. He then withdrew, and his grandfather thought how it was possible to attract the attention of two sects besides him not showing any nervousness in his presence. With a smile, he said the boy was someone the old man would like to test. The old man then called the Emperor of the Sword, asking if he was there, and the boy asked if he called. Then the elder asked him to keep an eye on the boy who had just left, and the young man said he would keep an eye. His grandfather thought he would see if that young man had the potential to take over his family. The protagonist said he had finally finished his important task, and Yeon told him to be careful because someone might hear him. A man then called the boy. The young man asked why he was blocking his way, asking him to leave, but the guy said they should have a pleasant conversation. With a threatening look, the protagonist asked if he wanted to talk to him when it seemed he came to fight, asking if he wasn't from Hebei province. People watched the two men, wondering why they were behaving that way because they weren't normal. Yen suggested they call for help, but Jinho told him to stay there because that person had issues to resolve with him because he was jealous of attracting the attention of the masters and now wanted to defeat him. The boy asked why he was jealous, telling him not to talk nonsense. But Jinho said if it wasn't for that reason, what would it be then? The boy clenched his fist and tried to attack the protagonist, but he dodged, calling him immature for falling for such a silly provocation. Then the man fell to the ground. He wondered how the boy had dodged his attack, and Jin-ho said he must be surprised, because Jin-ho had started learning martial arts and must have surprised him by dodging his attack, saying that since he started the fight, he should be prepared. Then the man grabbed his sword to attack the boy, saying he was convinced just by dodging a blow. Jumping on the man, Jin-ho mentioned that he was just defending himself, so he shouldn't complain if he ended up getting hurt, and he punched the guy, who tried to punch the boy but dodged again. The man asked the boy if he thought he wouldn't be hit, saying his movements were predictable. And the guy was surprised because the protagonist dodged everything again. The boy said his attacks were predictable, and that if he couldn't dodge them, he would be an idiot. Then the man noticed several people watching and thought it was impossible to be humiliated by a novice like him, and he went for the boy with his sword, saying he would kill him. People were surprised because the man had drawn his sword and wondered if they shouldn't stop it, suggesting calling the warriors. But the protagonist, with a cold look, kicked the guy, making the man's sword fly. He was surprised because he didn't know what had happened. But at the same moment, he took a punch, which sent him flying. The crowd watched the boy, realizing he had been practicing martial arts for a short time, while the other guy was already experienced, saying the young man must be a prodigy. Sometime later, the warriors arrived, asking if the boy was okay, but everything was already over. Then the warriors went after the man, and with a look of hatred, they said that this would not go unnoticed, and that they should ask the family directly about the severity of the situation. However, Jin-ho said he would resolve it with his own hands, drawing his sword on the man, mentioning that he did the same thing, so he should be prepared, asking if he should cut him with that sword. Desperate, the guy said he was wrong and that he wouldn't do it again. Then the protagonist released his sword, and the man fell to the ground. The boy smiled and asked the men to clean up that mess, who told him not to worry. They watched the young man from the background and mentioned that no movement was unnecessary and that everything was perfect, saying he had changed a lot. However, a figure was watching Jin-ho. She smiled, saying the boy seemed very capable. A lady asked the woman if they should still watch him. The woman said there was no harm in securing and worrying later, saying there was a chance he could be taken by someone else, so they should go first before their brothers noticed him. And she told the woman to gather all the information about that boy down to the smallest detail, because he would be the only one to find a variable in the situation, because that's how Myeryong would become the leader of the Seok family. A man spoke with Yeon, asking him to do him a favor, but he said he could accept it because he didn't have the capacity. The guy asked what he was talking about because Yeon and Jin-ho, although not of the same blood, were almost brothers, saying he just needed to create an opportunity. Mentioning that he had heard rumors that Yeon had gotten stronger since he learned martial arts with the young master because he had saved Emir's servant against 5 bullies some time ago. Yeon said that was true, and the skinny guy said he had been practicing the sword technique for 5 years and was still that way, saying he wanted to learn the technique correctly. Saying that if Jin-ho refused, he would give up because at his age it was his last chance. Then Yeon said he would try to teach him, but he shouldn't have expectations, and the skinny guy thanked him. The young master arrived at the place. He wondered what all that noise was because it was disturbing his training, asking Yeon to expel him. The skinny guy was in front of the protagonist, who asked why he was there, and the skinny guy thought the pressure from that boy was no joke, but he had to do something because this was his chance. Yeon introduced him, saying the man's name was Myeryong, then he knelt down, saying he was like a brother to Yeon since they were children. Jin-ho smiled, saying it must be true because Yeon hadn't expelled him yet, and the man said it was true. The man asked if he wanted to learn martial arts quickly, agreeing and saying he was a trustworthy person. Jin-ho watched the man and asked why he should teach, and Myeryong said it would be useful. The protagonist watched the man thinking he had good character, had great willpower, remembering he needed someone to handle the minor tasks, besides having earned Yeon's trust over time. Then Jin-ho asked if his name was Jang Myeryong, and the man said he was right. The boy asked if he knew, and the man was confused, saying he didn't know what he was talking about. With a look of disdain, the protagonist said he had no talent for martial arts. Myeryong said he was aware of that. Jin-ho asked if even knowing that he would continue, and the guy said yes, because his dream was to become a martial artist. The young man said being a martial artist might not be as he thought because those called heroes were just people thirsty for honor, besides, he could lose his life. However, Myeryong said he wasn't blind because he understood that death could come at any moment. But his dreams weren't in vain, and the boy remembered his old times. Jin-ho then said he would keep an eye on him to see how he would fare. The man smiled, not believing what Jin-ho had said. However, he said he still hadn't accepted him because he would just watch him. Myeryong understood what the young man said and said he understood. But Yeon told him not to be discouraged because he had at least gotten a chance with the boy. The man thanked the young man, saying he wouldn't disappoint, and Jin-ho said he could go just to the front yard, saying he could do what he wanted, and from that moment on he shouldn't let other people get close, telling them to expel them. With tears on his face, the skinny guy thanks Yeon, but he says it was thanks to his luck, as the young master came out at the right time, yet he still thanks him for not having expelled him. At that moment, someone arrives, saying they wanted to see the young master. The man asks if he was inside, and the two say he was. He says he carried a summons from Miss Myeryong, but Yeon asks what it was about. with a menacing look. The man says their job was not to ask questions, but to take him to their master. Yin says he understands and then leads the man away. The protagonist, annoyed, crosses his arms, asking why so many people were bothering him, but Yin asked to listen to them. In front of the protagonist, the man apologizes for simply entering without notice. Jin-ho looks at the mustachioed man, asking if that was really what he heard. The mustachioed man asks if there was a problem, as he was there to deliver a summons order from Miss Miryong, and the young man thinks she liked to create thieves. Crossing his arms, the protagonist mentions that he barked without knowing the strength of his opponent. With a look of hatred, the mustachioed man stares at the protagonist and says a good beating might be the remedy for him. The man says he became arrogant since he started getting attention. Then he lunges at the protagonist, saying he would teach him a lesson. He tries to punch the boy, thinking he wouldn't even be able to react as expected of him. However, the protagonist dodges. The man is confused that he dodged, but at the same moment, he takes a slap from the boy, which sends him flying. Surprised, he asks how the boy dodged his punch. But Jin-ho continues punching him, saying it was far from over. The mustachioed man realizes the boy hit a pressure point attack, because he hit exactly there. Seeing him coming towards him, the protagonist says he wanted to end this, and that it was time for some fist therapy. Sometime later, still during the day, the mustachioed man was unconscious on the ground, and the protagonist says it was quite annoying how those insignificant people were so arrogant in their own home. But Yoon asks if he wanted him to read the letter, but the young man says he didn't want to read the summons, saying that those who regret are usually those who take wrong actions, and therefore they would send someone better. Sometime later, the protagonist was having coffee and someone asked why he responded so aggressively. But the young man says it was so that it would never happen again, as people who underestimate him will learn a lesson. The woman says he changed a lot, but the boy says if he hadn't changed, he would already be dead. With a smile, Miryong says her Jin-ho really grew up a lot. The protagonist is confused as he doesn't remember when he became her Jin-ho to her. But the girl asks if he wasn't being too cold, as Miryong was his sister. But the young man asks why she had called him, telling her to get straight to the point. She says they didn't need to waste time and says she needed his help, saying she needed the protagonist's help to become the head of the family, but the boy refuses. Miryong asks if the boy received an offer from the other brothers or if he was waiting for one, but Jin-ho was not interested in anything, as he didn't want to be the family leader. She asks if he plans to join the Jangu, but there was no reason to leave the family and starts saying various things to convince the boy, saying it would be much grander than the protagonist's goal. But the boy says that would only benefit her and her family, but Miryong says it would also benefit him as that's where his roots were, saying he needed a supporter, but Jin-ho didn't need one. Watching the boy, she thinks that's true, because he caught the attention of the elders of the largest sects after learning martial arts, crushing those who started before him and surpassing martial artists, besides demonstrating talent and potential and having no reason to show arrogance. The protagonist says the young lady would be fine without him, but the girl is confused as he was calling her a lady and asks to be called sister, and the boy wonders how she dared. The girl says she had one last wish to ask and asks the boy to continue having tea with her. The boy says as long as she doesn't bring rude people. The protagonist leaves and Miryong asks if he would stay that way until the end and tells him to wait, as she was not one to give up easily. A man tells the elder that the protagonist fought and defeated Miryong's bodyguards, and even blocked his energy, causing a big problem, but the elder says if it was her bodyguard, then he was at least a first-class artist, curious whether it was luck or skill, thinking it was no coincidence, as that was not achieved by luck, and says he should ask him directly what happened. But the servant says it would be difficult to find him, and the elder asks why and if it was because the young man was hurt in the fight. But he says it wasn't that and says the boy left the mansion that morning without any companion. The boy walking says that the mountain remained the same as always and thanks to that he could find it without wandering around. However, the protagonist hears a noise wondering what it was, and heads in that direction thinking it was definitely the sound of weapons. Watching two people facing each other, and a woman was totally injured, with a man facing her. The two notice the boy and Jin-ho thinks this could liven up his day. In front of the two, the young man says that indeed, that was the excitement he wanted. The guy asks who he was and Jin-ho says it wasn't important, because he was trying to pick up a woman in broad daylight. The girl mentions that he was a two-faced demon and that she was affected by his poison. The protagonist thinks it was a pity for her, as there were many men like that in that place. But she tells Jin-ho to be careful, and the young man watches the man. Heading towards him, the guy says he was an idiot as he was getting distracted while he was in front of him. Tried to grab the protagonist, but he dodges. Jin-ho mocks the man, asking if that was his secret technique. The guy wonders how he dodged his attack, but the boy says he just dodged because he was too slow. The protagonist observes a stone and says that if it was to attack a vulnerable enemy, he should at least do it right, throwing a stone at the man, hitting his knee squarely. The man kneels in pain, thinking the boy was showing off just because he was in front of a woman. Using black magic, he says his arrogance ends there, jumping at the protagonist, saying he would finish with just one blow. But the young man easily dodges, saying his attacks were too slow, and then punches the man in the stomach, saying he was used to dealing with people like him. The guy then becomes unconscious and ends up falling to the ground in front of the protagonist. The boy makes a hand gesture, saying he would seal his energy, saying he seemed like the type who liked an ending with a woman like her. The girl thanks the boy for saving her, but the boy tells her not to tell anyone about it. At the same moment, someone calls the woman, and her uncle arrives asking what happened. Moved by emotion, she hugs her uncle, apologizing and saying she should have been more careful, but the man says it was he who should be apologizing. Then the protagonist thinks that the girl had gone out to explore on her own. Her uncle notes that she doesn't look well and asks if she was poisoned, and the woman confirms she was poisoned. The man suggests she regulate her breathing, saying he would use his energy to draw out the poison, so she need to focus. He uses his energy on the girl, saying that it was done. The girl thanks him, and the man expresses his happiness that she is well. The man apologizes to the protagonist for the delay in introducing himself, thanking him for saving the young master. The two introduce themselves, stating their names and families. But the young man says to leave the introductions for later as they still had to deal with another person, and that they shouldn't have any problems at the moment. Mayan says that the man was called the Two-Faced Demon, and her uncle is surprised by the name. The man thinks that this guy was a first-class warrior with a history of even killing masters. With a happy look, the girl says that Jinho managed to defeat him with one strike and even managed to dodge his attacks. The young man notices the girl talking about him and thinks he should leave there soon. The man then tries to ask the protagonist's name. However, the boy had already left. Nave is worried, saying she didn't even know the boy's name, and her uncle notices the girl's flushed face and wonders if she was in love. Clenching his fist, her uncle says he would find the young man and that he wouldn't stay hidden for long. And since they knew his face, it wouldn't take long, as his family never forgets a favor, so they will find him. Jinho walks through the forest at night, thinking he was nearby and the terrain was still the same. The boy observes something among the bushes. With a smile, he says it was as expected. Looking at a plant, the boy says his memory wasn't wrong. But then he notices something. A cat is in front of him, and he wonders what it is. Jinho realizes that the cat understands what he is saying and thinks about using his eye to check. Observing, he sees that it's not a normal cat, but a spiritual beast, although it's in the initial phase. If the cat sees something, and the protagonist realizes that the cat can even see his internal energy. Placing his hand on the cat, he says he will give it something to eat, as he had his eye on that place. The boy sees various plants, saying that 60-year-old ginseng wasn't so bad. Then the two of them ate that plant. Jinho looked at the herb, noting that it was a good medicinal herb, for he could already feel the energy spreading throughout his body, and he begins to absorb that energy. He is relieved because he manages to absorb it. However, Jinho is surprised when he realizes that the cat had stayed by his side all night waiting for him. Rising, the young man thanks the cat for protecting him, saying he would reward it when they meet again. Yet the cat did not leave his side. The young man asks if the cat wanted to follow, and it seemed to affirm, saying that if it wanted to follow him, he wouldn't stop it, and from that day on its name would be Darky. In the afternoon, arriving at the mansion, the cat walked him on the rooftops, and the protagonist asks the cat if that place was good for it, saying that he wasn't sure how long he would stay there, but he would stay until the end of the year and tells it to make itself at home. However, someone calls the boy. Yo and his nanny were with the skinny one, saying that if he had given the order, he would go with the boy. The woman hugs him, asking how the trip was, and the young man responds that everything was fine. Yun asks if he had done what he was supposed to do, and the boy says he had a very good experience. Observing the cat, they ask the protagonist where that cat came from, and he says it was a new member of the family, and that its name was Darky. Mary Young asks if it was a pet cat, but Jinho says it was his subordinate. The nanny asks if it was really his subordinate, saying that it was very affectionate, but the boy says that it was very dangerous, because it could easily defeat third-class warriors, and the woman tells him to stop making jokes. Miriam is surprised because the cat became a subordinate and he hasn't even been recognized yet. Jinho asks why he seems so serious, but the skinny one laughs, saying that even though it was just a cat, it bothered him as he still felt like an outsider. The young man asks if he was training, and the man confirms, saying that he was training every day with Yun. He leaves, saying that at some point he will check and that he was going to rest, so they should continue what they were doing. Now the next day, Marion was practicing his martial arts while the cat was in the background. With an angry look, he notices that the cat was yawning and wonders how it had the nerve to do that. So he starts arguing with it, asking how it had the audacity to ignore him. At that moment, Ian and Jinho arrive and start laughing at the skinny one because he was arguing with a cat. Embarrassed, he laughs, saying that Darky didn't seem to be an ordinary cat, but the protagonist says that he was right and that calling it an animal could make it angry, saying it might even hit him. However, Marion laughs, saying that would be impossible, but at that moment, the cat kicks him in the face. Laughing, Jinho says that he had warned him because it always gets angry when called an animal. Darky starts moving around as if trying to show something. However, it starts doing some very strange martial arts moves. The guy is surprised because the cat even knows martial arts, wondering how just a cat could do that, but the boy says that it was a spiritual beast, so it was capable of doing that. Yim notices the cat, saying that it was not normal at all, and Jinho asks them not to tell anyone. However, the boy says they had a guest and Ian asks who it would be. A man in front of the protagonist says that it had been a long time, and that the elder was requesting his presence. Inside the mansion, the protagonist tells the old man that it had been a long time and asks how he has been. But the man asks how he could be well because his grandson left without saying anything. The boy asks if he could still say everything. His grandfather asks if he was provoking him, but the young man says he was just telling the truth. And the elder asks Jinho if he knew that there were people who couldn't even tell the truth, but the boy stays silent. The old man says that something good must have happened to him because his energy had changed, and the boy says yes because he had been lucky. Asking the young man if he still intended to achieve greatness through martial arts, Jinho says yes, but couldn't find anything interesting there. The old man says that this was his home, but the boy says that just because it's his home doesn't mean he has to stay. The elder mentions that there were always people who left, but he was different. And the protagonist says it was just because of his current situation. Because if it were in his past, he could never speak to the elder that way. And says that he was showing interest in him just because he was useful. But the old man does not deny it, saying that it was true, but the desire for him to stay was genuine. The boy smiles, saying he would accept his sentiment, but believes he is not as good as the old man thinks. Crossing his arms, an elder says that if he's going to lie, he should at least do it better because no one would believe that. However, smiling, the boy says that many people would believe it. Observing the protagonist, the old man thinks he could have stayed in his room all this time just to be able to leave the family. And given his recent actions, there is a high probability that this had been planned. So he asked the boy what he wanted by leaving the family, and if he had a path he would follow, as he wasn't content with just the dragon's tail. Smiling, he asks about the dragon's tail. And the old man says yes, though calling him a dragon isn't right, and asks why the young man didn't elevate himself like a dragon. However, Jinho says that wasn't his responsibility, but his brother's. The elder asks if he didn't carry the family's blood, but the young man says only half, and that the task belonged to those who continued the lineage. Surprised, the old man realizes the boy had no intention of returning to the family, and the young man confirms it. However, the elder asks him to at least celebrate his birthday before leaving and until then talk with his grandfather, and asks if he would do that favor for him, to which the boy says yes. The old man says he can go now because it seemed like he was already anxious to leave. Then he says the boy inherited the family's stubbornness and asks his butler what he thought. He says the young man had changed a lot in a short time, and that his energy could be compared to that of a beginner, but he shouldn't be evaluated based on his energy alone. The elder sighs, thinking it was truly regrettable, because with that boy, the family could become a true dragon. At that moment, Jinho arrives home. Yan and Marion greet the young man, asking if his trip was good, saying that he must have had a long conversation with the old man, but the boy says that wasn't it, and that he was called by Miss Marion when he was on his way there, which is why he arrived a little late. They ask if something happened, but Jinho says it was nothing significant. Darky caught her attention and she said that the cat was surprisingly useful. Exhausted, the boy says he is hungry and asks Yan to tell the nanny to make something for them to eat, and Yan says he will inform her. The young man, feeling discouraged, thinks he just wanted to live a peaceful life and that he had a bad feeling. At the same moment, two people were in front of the protagonist's house. They were the people he had saved before, with the girl asking if that was his family's house. The girl wonders if it was right to show up unannounced, but the man says they came just to thank him, so she shouldn't worry. In front of the guards, the man says his name is Bake from the Habuk family, and that he wanted to see the young master, asking to announce his arrival, and the guard is surprised to hear the family's name. A boy greets the woman, saying it had been a long time since he saw her and asking what she was doing at his house. The girl mentions that she wanted to see the young master Jinho, and the boy gets irritated hearing that name. Bake mentions that Jinho had saved his niece, and that's why they wanted to thank him personally. The boy wonders if Jinho had become famous and says he will guide them. He takes them to the protagonist, thinking that he was very obvious as he must be curious about his relationship with that girl. Introducing herself to the protagonist, the girl says her name is Naeun and came to thank him for saving her, apologizing for not being able to do so sooner. The boy smiles, telling them to come in and apologizing for his humble accommodations, but they say they seem quite nice. Bak thanks the boy for guiding them there, saying he would have a long conversation with Jinho. The boy says he will ask someone to take them to their rooms later, as they wanted to welcome them properly as guests. At that moment, the young man whispers in the man's ear, telling him to find out what was happening between them, but the man asks how he could do that when one of the greatest experts of the Habuk family was there. The irritated man asks if he couldn't do that, and the young man says he couldn't. He says that family was famous for producing excellent martial artists from humble origins, and if the family could leverage that strength, they could become the best in the world. Mentioning that having the girl as a wife wouldn't be bad either. Inside the protagonist's house, the girl says she wanted to make a discreet visit and asks if she was interfering too much, but the boy says it's all right. Bake observes the boy, thinking he was different from his generation, and that it was impressive he didn't show any nervousness in front of such a beauty like that woman. Then the girl remembers something and hands it to the protagonist, who asks what it was. She responds that it was a token of her gratitude because she wanted to repay him for saving her life, handing him a sort of plaque that could provide various benefits as it allows him to have financial support. The boy is astonished by the gift because it was a lot, but Baek says it wasn't very important to the young lady, and that if he refused, she wouldn't leave that place since she was stubborn. So the protagonist accepts the gift, and the girl is happy. Jin-ho thinks that was good because he was looking for ways to get money, but it could also be bad if misused. However, if used in moderation, it could be useful. The day then passes. They ask the boy if he slept well, and the young man confirms. However, the blushing girl seems to want to say something to the protagonist. So he asks if she had something to say to him, and she asks if he had noticed. Embarrassed, she asks the boy if he wanted to train with her. Jin-ho asks if it was a fight. Then he accepts her request, saying he would start as soon as she was ready. Drawing his sword, the boy says he will allow her to make the first attack. In front of him, the girl says she is eager to learn from him. And at that moment, she launches an attack at the protagonist, sending a burst of energy. However, Jin-ho easily dodges one by one. The girl is surprised because she didn't hit any attack. Nonetheless, she charges at the protagonist, suggesting a hand-to-hand combat, attacking the boy again, but he dodges. Drawing his sword, the young man says it is his turn, going all out and attacking the girl directly. She is surprised because she thought the young man didn't have much strength, but in fact he had incredible power. She observes the boy, thinking it was as if he had already anticipated her attacks. Seeing no option, the girl has to retreat. However, the protagonist advances on her. Trying to surprise him, she attacks from above, thinking that from that distance, she had the advantage. Determined, she delivers her attack. However, the boy places his sword on the ground and gives her a two-legged kick. That makes both spears fly. However, the protagonist manages to grab one, easily immobilizing the girl. She is surprised observing his skill, and the young man smiles, convinced of his victory. He asks the girl if he could give her some advice, and she says yes because she wanted his guidance. The protagonist mentions that her technique was good but very predictable, recommending her to use unexpected attacks. She is confused about the unexpected attacks, and asks if his previous attack was intentional, saying that holding a sword didn't just mean he would use it. She asks if they could train again later, and he says that's fine because it helps him too. The woman is happy, saying it was nice of him to think that way, then bids him farewell, saying she would come back the next day. Jin-ho thought she got exaggerated, but reaching that level in just 1 year was incredible, thinking that her potential was greater than the 6 dragons. The girl talks to her uncle, saying she was a straightforward person, but he asks if that was good because they say one shouldn't be too obvious when they like someone. Sighing, she says she doesn't understand what he's talking about. However, the girl asks her uncle if he was curious to know how the boy's skill was. Baek, thoughtful, says he was really curious, and if an opportunity arises, they should test him together because it could be a good way to repay his kindness. Now the Seok family's house. A man reads a book, and this man was Mayon, the master of the Seok house. He asks if it was true about Jin-ho changing so quickly, and his servant confirms, saying he saw it personally. A boy who went unnoticed and rejected the elder's proposals, even winning a duel with the Habuk family's sword flower Naeun. The man says that geniuses appear out of nowhere, and Mayong says it's a good thing, but in this case it's bad because the boy wanted to leave the family. The servant responds that after rejecting Miryong's proposal, he rejected the offer of the young master Jin Ryong. Mayong sighs, saying he even rejected his father's proposal, so he wouldn't care about others' offers. However, the servant mentions that if he takes a look at the report, he will see something interesting. He observes a report talking about the sword flower, saying it wasn't a bad plan, but it was almost impossible to happen, because the Habuk Pang family was one of the greatest powers in the world. One of the rich families leading the Mirim world, that the girl herself being interested in him would make it almost impossible to bring her just with money. The man says he will think of something better, and Mayong says he had another thing to mention, asking Jin Ryong to stop making trouble, because if his relationship gets damaged due to his actions, he will be held responsible. At the protagonist's house, a man pets the cat. The boy observes the man, thinking Darky was calm, so he shouldn't be an unwanted guest. The man greets the young man, saying it had been a long time. This man was the uncle of the body the protagonist was in, and his name was Deokwol. The young man says it had been a long time since he saw him. He says he heard rumors about the boy who had changed a lot recently, and asks if it was true. However, the boy says he would change much more in the future because he was getting older. His uncle says he is only 17 and keeps talking about getting older and says it is already enough because he understands what it means to come of age in the family. He sighs, saying he understands better than anyone, and Jin-ho says he is grateful for all his support. Seok Deokwol, the representative of the Seok Wind Escort Agency managed by the Seok family. He was born as an illegitimate child of the family, and that's why he understood Jin-ho's situation better than anyone. He couldn't leave his nephew who was left alone, so whenever he returned to the family after a mission, he took care of the boy. And since he promised the original owner of the body, he couldn't ignore the man. The protagonist asks the man what he was thinking, and he thinks he wasted his life trying to be noticed by someone who hadn't even lived half his time. Jin-ho says that the cat has already left so he could say what was happening. His uncle says it might be embarrassing, but he needs his help because his agency is in danger, and he needs Bak's help since the White Demon's agency had devised a sinister plan to destroy his agency. Although there is no evidence, he is sure it was them, and the situation is quite complicated. Jinho says if Bak intervened, things would be much easier because he was one of the main masters of the province. Regardless of the fact that the Crow Fortress was linked to the Green Forest Fortress, it wouldn't stand a chance. Dequol mentions that he had asked for a favor from him before but was refused, so as the protagonist had a special relationship with him, his uncle came to ask him as a last resort. However, the boy says their relationship wasn't that close but could arrange a meeting. It would probably be refused again. Anxious, his uncle says he should try again, and if he could arrange a meeting, he could handle the rest. Nonetheless, Jinho says they would meet them immediately as there was no reason to delay, and it seemed they were waiting outside the door. And at that moment, the two appear. Embarrassed, they observe the protagonist. Dequol introduces himself saying they met yesterday, and the man remembers him, saying he was the representative of the Siak Wind Agency. Then the protagonist asks them to sit, asking if they hadn't already greeted each other. So Bake says they had done more than that, and says the reason they were gathered at that moment was related to that, and asks if he also planned to ask for his help, but the boy says it was just a request. But before that, he hands them the gold plaque, reluctant to accept. He says helping the young lady was just doing what was right, and he never expected anything in return, and says he was returning it because he didn't want Bake to feel obligated to do something he didn't want to, saying he wouldn't make a request but propose something, saying if he helped, there would be two benefits, one of which was resolving his curiosity and gaining experience. Bake asks if it was about the curiosity about that, and the protagonist confirms, saying he would show his martial arts techniques by facing the leader of the fortress. The man asks if he was confident because the fortress leader was a formidable opponent. However, the boy asks if he thought he was bluffing and asks him to verify his skills, suggesting they start without delay. Jinho and Bake begin to prepare for a fight, and his uncle asks if he would be a match for Master Bake, but the girl says it wouldn't end as easily as he thinks, because Jinho shouldn't be underestimated. Dequol is confused because even if it's true, Bake is very strong. The protagonist suggests they start, and Bak says he allows him to start, and then the protagonist goes for it, throwing a punch at the man, but he dodges. Bake thinks the boy was fast, and his aura was notable, and he hadn't even noticed he was activating his technique, because if that was the case, he would just stop the movements that bother him, using his aura on the boy. However, Bake is surprised because Jinho is penetrating his energy and approaching without getting distracted. Then the young man advances on the man. An aura begins to emanate from his fingers, colliding with Bak's, saying it wasn't the time to suppress him with force, as there was no need to fight inefficiently, saying his move was over. So they should start right away, beginning a hand-to-hand battle. Jinho coldly says there was no need to win because he just needed a decent fight. Bak is surprised because he realizes the young man had closed the distance. At that moment, he takes a punch to the stomach, thinking he let his guard down and was caught off guard, and punches the ground, thinking it was as if he anticipated all of his moves, almost impossible to believe. Jinho advances on Bake. Then the two throw punches, causing an explosion of aura. The two prepare for the next attack, and Bak thinks he could assess the boy's skills if he unleashed all his power. Then he thinks there would be no problem if it was just once. Jinho smiles, saying he would never hide his energy because that would satisfy his curiosity. However, the man thinks that based on the skill he has shown so far, he would be able to handle it, and an immense aura begins to emanate around the man, telling him to try to block it. Using his secret technique, throwing a burst of energy at the boy. From outside the mansion, a huge explosion appears on the roof. People are surprised by that immense aura. The thin man asks Saiyan if they should stop. She tells him just to watch because everything would be fine. The man says he was afraid something might happen, but Yeon tells him to relax because it was her master who was fighting. Baek begins to laugh, and Jinho suggests they stop fighting because he had seen enough. The two were surprised by the protagonist's ability, and the thin man with tears in his eyes says it was expected of his master and they'd always believe in him, but Yeon laughs, saying he was worried just a moment ago. Baek asks the boy if he would be okay because if he fought the strongest of the fortress, his skills would be revealed, but Jinho says he never intended to hide them. Observing his uncle, he says he couldn't abandon someone who had cared for him since his childhood, no matter the reason. Dequol is happy with what the boy had said. Then Baek says he will help, and he thinks that the more he saw the boy, the more impressive he was, and that he needed to inform his family when everything was over, to establish a connection with the hidden dragon stronger than the 6 dragons. Then time passes. The protagonist and those accompanying him walk through the mountains, and a man thinks he wasn't sure if that was the right course of action. That man is the head of the Siak Wind Agency. Sometime before, the protagonist was negotiating with the people, suggesting dividing their forces, and the man is confused, asking if he wanted to make a chain attack. However, the young man says it wasn't exactly that because he just needed enough people to ensure no one would escape. Nevertheless, the man says they couldn't be so reckless because they needed to recover the goods and for that reason couldn't divide their forces. That wasn't the only action of the Black Crow Fortress, because the White Demons Agency also supported them, and he asks if he thought he would trust that evil plan. However, the protagonist says they placed someone to smuggle the goods, and their goal was to undermine the trust in the Siak Wind Agency. The man thinks that was a plausible scenario, but even so, dividing their forces was absurd. The other guy tells him not to worry if things go wrong, because as long as he's there, nothing would happen. Observing the protagonist, he thinks that if even Baek had said that, he would pay to see what would happen. Back to the present, the man thinks that although Baek had stepped in because he had allowed it, he is astonished by the reduction of the forces entering through the main gate by more than half. The man tries to say something, but at that moment, the boy delivers a kick that destroys the wall. Jinho says there was no need to worry, but the man is furious, asking how he couldn't be worried in that situation. The boy's uncle says it will be fine because the young man is strong. An armed man arrives asking who they were. Observing the three figures in front of him, the protagonist grabs him by the neck, lifting him into the air. The man says that he will see with his own eyes how strong Jinho really is. Jinho, holding the man by the neck, agonizing, throws him to the ground. At that moment, a group of people arrives, asking how he dared to attack the Green Forest, charging at the protagonist, saying he had a lot of courage. But the boy smiles, drawing his sword. In the blink of an eye, he cuts them down one by one. The man is surprised, saying he had heard stories of Jinho getting stronger, but this was much more. A group stands before Jinho. Walking towards them, the young man asks if they were not going to come at him, wondering how those cowards managed to enter the Green Forest as they didn't even have basic courage. Jinho asks them to bring their leader, but a figure arrives, calling the bandits idiots. A man approaches the bandits, grabbing one by the collar, asking if they were idiots for running away because of a kid, saying they dared to call themselves Black Crow Bandits. Hitting the man, he says he better be dead. With his face on the ground, the man groans in pain. Meanwhile, the protagonist watches the whole situation from a distance. The fortress leader says that Jinho is an insolent brat, but praises the boy for bringing a beautiful lady with him. Our protagonist, disdainful of the situation, tells him to come at him, which makes the man completely furious. He then comes at him, calling him insolent. But at that moment, the boy did something that shocked everyone. No one could believe what they were seeing. He literally held the sword with his hands. Even the fortress leader is incredulous at this. How could a kid hold his sword like that? The protagonist applied enough force on the sword, making the man doubt his own strength. At that moment, the sword breaks into several pieces. Again, he is impressed by being defeated by a kid. Jinho smashes his head into the ground with all his strength. The man passed away with just one blow. Smiling, he says the guy is as pathetic as he thought. His henchmen, seeing the situation, say they should report the incident. One of them turns, thinking he should protect the goods. But Seiyan stops him, asking why he was in a hurry. The woman blocks his path again, hitting him with all her strength in his abdomen. The woman sarcastically asked if the man thought he could overcome the efforts of a delicate lady like her. The protagonist approaches, praising the girl's attitude, and she replies that it is just as the young master told them. The tip to watch out for those looking for a chance to escape was more than correct. Upon checking the man's corpse, the hero is questioned about what he is doing. Then he comments that if the man committed suicide, it doesn't make sense to have captured him. In this case, it's necessary to check if he has a poison pill hidden in his mouth. The girl says that the man is meticulous, and the protagonist in turn comments that if one is going to do something, it should be done correctly. The scene shifts to the Habuk Pen's family's mansion. Peng Jingnuk asks to be informed about the first young master of the Siak family. One of his servants informs him that the boy's name is Siak Jin Raon and that he is 25 years old. Moreover, he is competing for family succession against his brothers. Despite his skills being indecent, the boy has the reputation of being limited, which is why Peng questions his martial arts, and the servant explains that he doesn't know any. In this case, the man gets irritated because a man who doesn't master martial arts and isn't even the official heir has the audacity to seek an engagement with his Naeun. This makes the head of the family begin to hate the boy for his presumption, and his servant unsuccessfully tries to calm him down. Apologizing for his excitement, he is questioned about Jinho, mentioned in the guard back's letter for having subdued the giant axe. The servant in turn confirms the sudden highlight gained last year, but before that, it's a fact that the boy was so discouraged that he even tried to live contrary. Showing curiosity on the subject, Peng asks if he is now a warrior comparable to his dragons, as he is astute in locating a fugitive bandit. The Siak Wind Escort Agency's contract offer is also quite favorable, so it's comforting that the boy is not just a fox calculating gains and losses. The most important thing in the end is that Siak Jinho also managed to enchant his Naeun, and the servant asks if they should call her back before rumors spread. Peng confirms, asking someone to bring her back, and if he is the reason the girl refuses to return, he should accompany her. And upon questioning if it is the fourth young master, the head of the family says yes, as he needs to see him with his own eyes. Among some workers carrying heavy backpacks with supplies, there are delicious foods inside some boxes. The nanny is surprised by all that, her eyes shining, and our hero questions if she is so happy. It's a fact that they have been living in poverty for a long time, and with the reward for the giant axe and the sudden support from the family, their living conditions are better. The nanny, in turn, comments that it's not that wealth makes her happy, but because it was sent by the master of the mansion himself. The protagonist commented that he also didn't expect him to send so much after he refused the request to stay, and at this moment, the nanny was confused about this request. Telling her not to get excited, our hero affirms he has already refused, but the girl doesn't mind being happy that the young master has finally received recognition. It is informed that the head of the Siak Wind escort agency is saying that the hero can go to their house anytime, but he doesn't want to go there. When questioning if the nanny likes these types of places, she explains that any place is good for her as long as her master is with her. Suddenly, one of the men from the mansion approaches in a frantic run while calling for his young master. In this case, the hero understands that a problematic guy has arrived and the nanny smiles, saying it is the charm of Mariam. The protagonist, for his part, comments that he would prefer the man to speak lower, but he is surprised by something. In front of everyone's eyes, Mariam presents himself with a clearly bruised and bloody face, raising the question of who made him look like that. After understanding that the master is talking about his face, he continues asking if he got into a fight. Mariam then finally explains what happened, surprising everyone. Apparently, the leader of the 7th group, Bong Woo-ryum, saw him provoking a fight with no choosem, so he gave him a beating while reprimanding him. The man says that a servant without a patron is at the mercy of the martial artists of the Solar Guards. In this case, he is questioned about why he doesn't belong anywhere. And Mariam responds that he is still under observation by the young master, and with that, our hero realizes it is his negligence for not giving a definitive answer. To resolve this, the protagonist asks his colleague to follow him, and he asks where they are going. With a serious face, the young master affirms that he will not tolerate his people being mistreated, including Mariam as one of his own. In this case, the protagonist again tells them to hurry to follow him, and the man thanks him, saying he will serve him with all his strength. In the region of the Solar Pavilion Guards, the boy comments to the young master that he is just a servant, and that in such a case, such consideration is unnecessary. However, it is said that being a servant or a warrior doesn't matter because attacking the man is the same as disrespecting the young master. And from now on, Mariam should pay attention to this, acting accordingly as one of the young master's men. Suddenly, 2 guards dressed in green question the protagonist about the reason why he is there. In this case, the hero asks for the leader of the 7th group, Bong Woo-ryum, to come see him, and the guards understand the command. Calling for Choosem, one of the guards is surprised by the man's presence, and he calls him a motherfucker, which deeply irritates our hero. In the face of this curse, the young master's heart trembles with fury, and the guard responsible for the insult tries to defend himself. In light of this, the protagonist asks if the man thinks he is someone to be trifled with. The guard tries to say that wasn't what he meant, but he feels all the pressure exerted by the boy, thinking he had heard rumors but didn't expect this much. Other soldiers shout at the hero, asking him to calm his anger. However, it was unthinkable for the young master to calm down after having his people disrespected, which ends up putting everyone in a desperate situation. Getting straight to the point, everyone is there only for the contract, and the hero says is obvious. They don't care about a bastard's son or his servant. Suddenly, someone shouts to stop. This is the leader of the 7th group, who asks the 4th young master the meaning of all this. He is pleased by Bong's arrival and explains that he was trying to teach the clueless fools and their leader their proper places. The Solar Guard, in turn, gets irritated, asking what was said a moment ago. Then the hero comments that the warrior sold his pride for money. Faced with such an affront, the warrior draws his sword furiously, saying that the 4th young master has crossed the line. In this case, he prepares for an attack, saying he will teach him to respect his elders. After the first strike, the protagonist easily dodges, questioning if something like this is really first class, because the movements are full of flaws. Bong, in turn, is surprised that someone is dodging his attack so easily, concluding that the boy is more than just a simple genius. After playing around a bit, it finally comes time to end this. Raising just 2 fingers, the hero stops the Solar Guard's blade with extreme ease. Thus, he says that the warrior is not as skilled as he thought. In his mind, the hero knows that if it were his past self, he would have taken the man's life, but this is not something he can do now. Preparing a fatal strike, the protagonist states that this will ensure a clear message so that no one in his family underestimates him again. Holding Bong's blade with his left hand, the young master pulls it, disarming the man. Without giving the guard a chance to react with a brief sword movement, the protagonist subdues Bong. In the background, the guards were impressed that the leader of the 7th group was defeated so easily and wondered how the young master became so powerful. With a smile, the hero comments that the man must pay the price for poorly training his men and attempting to disrespect him, but suddenly someone calls his name. This someone is the leader of the Solar Guards, Ma Chang-san, who asks for the conflict to stop for the sake of peace in the area. The leader guarantees that he will make Woo-ryum and Choosem apologize and furthermore will administer the appropriate disciplinary actions. Ma Chang was brought there by the Supreme Elder and has been the leader of the Solar Guards for over 20 years, being considered a true warrior at heart. Out of respect for the leader, the hero decides to end the confusion, but if something like this happens again, he won't let it slide so easily. After the protagonist's surrender, it is time for the guards to apologize, which they promptly accept without any complaints. The two kneel, saying they have made a grave mistake and asking for forgiveness. After apologizing to the young master, he asks if there is anyone else there deserving an apology from the guards. Now addressing Miriam, the man asks for forgiveness for having made a grave mistake. This ends up confusing him, so the young master approaches, asking what he is waiting for, and Miriam gladly accepts the apologies. Michelle, in turn, asks if they should settle this way, and the protagonist agrees. With the young master's departure, the leader of the Solar Guards now understands why the Haba Peng family is striving so hard because a monster has appeared in the Siak family. In his quarters, a training session begins being supervised by our protagonist. Since that day, Zhang Miriam and Tak Yun have dedicated themselves even more to training. Having been accepted as the hero's follower, Zhang became even more enthusiastic. No longer worried about the watchful eyes around him, he walked with his shoulders held high, which was preferable to bragging around. In addition to this, other annoying guests continued to make frequent visits. Although now it seems the hero has adapted and has merely become part of his routine. After walking a bit through the mansion, the protagonist informs his nanny of his presence, and she promptly offers to prepare a meal for everyone. However, it is mentioned that today they will have one more person with them, which makes the girl curious. Unexpectedly, Nain appears accompanied, greeting the young master Siak. After it is commented that the girl brought an unexpected guest today, she just laughs and confirms. The man in turn steps forward to initiate the conversation. He introduces himself as Peng Mujin from the Peng family of Haibi, as well as Nain's older brother. After introducing himself, our protagonist also introduces himself as Siak Jinho and says it is a pleasure to meet the man. Peng apologizes for the sudden visit, saying he would have contacted them earlier but was worried the message might not be delivered. Without giving much importance to this, the protagonist just asks the man to come in and make himself comfortable. The girl in turn wonders if this is really necessary, whispering to her brother that she is worried the young master might feel overwhelmed. Peng says that if it is difficult to bring him back, at least she should meet him because everyone is curious to know who can transform a wild colt into a lady. Telling her to be careful, his sister warns that if he speaks out of turn, even he will not be spared. In this case, it is clear to the boy that his sister is in love. A beautiful sword is placed on the table, and the hero asks what it is. Peng explains that Nain insists she is indebted to the protagonist and asked him to deliver this, which is a sword made by the master blacksmith of their family. After checking the blade's edge, the sword is indeed impressive. In this case, Siak praises the sword for being perfectly balanced, saying he is not sure if he is really worthy of something so good. Nain is extremely happy that her companion liked her gift, and Peng is impressed that such a mischievous girl could demonstrate such courtesy. However, more importantly, it is questioned if the head of the Peng family is not busy since the girl has been at the Siak family for over a month. Peng confirms his master's commitments, but as his father is only third in the hierarchy, he is also tied up. The information about being third in the hierarchy is questioned, and the boy explains that his mother is the first and the second is Nain. In this case, Peng comments that he will not say anything since he is the lowest in the hierarchy, and Siak laughs at this situation, saying the two seem to get along well. In his thoughts, the boy believes the temples seem dull, lacking the hero's distinctive or impressive qualities. Still instinctively, Peng feels that the boy is far superior to him in skills, remembering that he is a specialist in manipulating internal energy. The young man would like to challenge him to a duel, but he knows that this is not something that can be asked out of the blue. After receiving such a generous gift, Siak asks if it would be appropriate to request a duel, which is exactly what the boy wanted. Faced with this, Peng understands that the man's perception is impressive and that he will not be an easy opponent. Outside the mansion, the two begin their preparations for the duel that will start soon. The duel will be a worthy spectacle to present to Mariang and Yoon since it was the protagonist who proposed the duel. It is expected that he will put on a great show. With Nayeon's brother's competitive spirit, it was inevitable that they would end up dueling sooner or later. With half his sword drawn, the boy states he is ready. Then our hero also confirms he has finished his preparations. In this case, the match begins with Siak rushing forward to attack first. A gust of wind rises due to the hero's immense speed, and the two warriors' swords clash. In his thoughts, the boy believed his opponent would avoid a direct confrontation due to the sword being new, but he attacked directly, being quite reckless. After the first strike, the swords ricochet off each other, and Peng, not losing time, counterattacks with a powerful skill that surprises the protagonist. However, he dodges easily, and the boy understands that his attack was precise, but even so, in an instant, his opponent disappeared. Even managing to defend against the hero's attack from his blind spot, he continues to be pushed back. At a certain point in the duel, Peng begins to tire and groan in pain. This makes the young master's servants truly happy, with one of them being impressed to see a duel between real professionals. The girl's father comments that the duel is quite surprising and Seon agrees, having initially believed that her brother would dominate in a direct confrontation. Being pushed back so easily deeply irritates the boy, and he refuses to lose as he was known as the fierce tiger rising in Janghu. In this case, the protagonist understands the subliminal message that his opponent will not give up without a fight. In such a case, the two launch energy attacks that collide, generating a powerful explosion. At this moment, the audience remains in awe of the incredible martial prowess displayed, determined to capture every detail with their eyes. More and more dangerous and powerful energy attacks are launched by Naeun's brother. Faced with the disparity in stature and arm reach of our hero, he knows that to overcome these differences, he must get closer. Thus, he moves towards his opponent, deflecting each of the attacks with that sword. And he already prepares to strike, thinking that a novice who hasn't even reached perfection will not pose a threat to him. However, Seok cannot let it end like this because it's not every day he has the chance to awaken his senses from his past life. Realizing that his adversary is laughing in this situation, Peng believes is his sign to show his trump card. Thus, the boy resigns himself to showing the young master the supreme technique passed down by the head of the Habuk family, the Divine Arts of Chaos Thunder, which is a technique with high destructive power. In view of this, the protagonist retreats, placing his sword in a defensive position to prepare for a counterattack. A slash is delivered towards the energy blasts that are launched through the air. Then another slash with a thrust leaves Peng completely disoriented. Even having seen everything firsthand, the boy still couldn't believe the grandeur of the young master. But in the end, he exercises the humility he has, admitting defeat because there is nothing more he can show. With the end of the battle, Seok thanks his opponent for his effort, and Peng says he was a bit hurt that Naeun didn't cheer for him, but it was obvious that this would happen, and in the end, he learned a lot. The hero, in turn, says it was a good experience for him as well, and the boy laughs, saying he has never been pushed so impressively before. In this case, the hero comments that it's time for lunch and says his nanny is an excellent cook. So Peng shows excitement to taste the dishes his sister talks so much about. As the boy briefly saw the first master the day before, he thought the rumors were exaggerated, so he didn't expect much, but it was hard to believe they were siblings. The head of the family asks for his son's thoughts after interacting directly, and Peng says it's exactly as Guard Bake described. Given what was seen in this duel, Peng thinks that becoming a family doesn't seem like a bad idea after all. In one of the rooms of a residence, a man is intrigued about the Thunder Tiger of the Wind Arm, saying that Jinho earned a quite impressive nickname. In this case, that is what worries the other man because when the news spreads that the young master of the Peng family came for a duel, that will become known in the world. Thinking about the Peng family, the elder says he heard they rejected Jin Raong's marriage proposal. The fact that Jinho left the mansion for the escort mission conference right after deciding to participate means he doesn't care about Jin Raong. The elder continues that Jinho is not interested in the Wind Escort Agency and that his interest in the escort mission conference is perplexing. However, it is a fact that if the boy acts, he will elevate the prestige of the Seok family to the highest pinnacle. So whatever his purpose in participating, everything indicates it will be beneficial, leaving those elders really excited to see what will happen next. After some time, a man welcomes Jinho, happy that he finally arrived. The man says he should have gone to meet him, but he ended up being stuck preparing for the conference. The young master has no problem because the carriage was comfortable, providing a very pleasant trip for everyone, even having a chance to get out in the middle. The boy announces that later he will show the protagonist's room, but for now, they will go to the banquet hall because the priority at the moment is to eat. In that place, several flags represent each region, such as the White Demon Escort Agency. While walking around, one of the hero's colleagues asks about the flags, so that man informs them they are from the escort agencies at the conference. However, even certain guys had the courage to show up at this place today. Bam Wongang, the young master of the White Demon Agency, is seen looking in a bad situation since the last problem because he is alone. The host believes the man might want to regain his position in the hair contest, having heard that he is good at fighting. Seok smiles, saying it would be cool if the man challenged him. But that was something unlikely due to Bium's tendency to oppress smaller agencies. Fighting contests at the banquet are no different from gangs, showing that the strength of the escort agency is crucial for the next generations. Again, the host calls everyone to lunch to then take a look around the place, also informing that you will continue to prepare things while the group eats. Faced with that vast menu on their table, the heroes comment that it is really good when rich agencies come together, using spices from various regions. In this case, the hero states that his colleagues can eat as much as they want and that he will leave for just a minute. In his absence, the protagonist asks Darky to stay with the nanny. The nanny, in turn, questions where Seok is going and he informs her that he has someone to meet. Given this, the woman tells the hero to talk to the girls. However, the protagonist says it is not like that and the nanny understands it is hard to find someone like Naeun. Suddenly, all the civilians become curious because it seems that the young master of the White Demon Agency challenged the Green Pine Agency. Hearing this rumor, Seok becomes intrigued to see the Green Pine Agency. Bium, in turn, questions if the chief and young master of the agency are refusing his challenge for a duel. However, the girl representing Green Pine says that a duel must be accepted by both sides, not obligated to accept just because the white demon asked. The young master asks his sister to step aside, stating this is the chance they were waiting for, but his Nuna tells him to stay quiet. The protagonist understands he has found who he is looking for, but they are still very young, and their looks suggest they have something pending with the white demon agency. Deciding to interfere in that cowardice, our hero steps into the conflict. He says it is a pleasure to meet the boys and asks if they are the chief and young master of the Green Pine Agency. In this case, they confirm, but they ask cautiously about the identity of the man in front of them. For interrupting their conversation, Biam yells at our hero, despising his rude attitude. However, when trying to touch him, Siak easily dodges, even with his back to the opponent. This move messes with Biam's head, understanding it is not a normal move. After analyzing a bit, the member of the White Demon finally realizes it is the Thunder Tiger of the Wind Arm from the Siak family. In view of this, the situation is now completely different from before. With a smile, the protagonist apologizes for his lack of manners because he was happy to see a familiar face there. He introduces himself as Siak Jinho, and Biam Wongying responds, informing that he is from the White Demon Agency. Upon hearing where the young master is from, the hero comments that he has an unfortunate connection with this group. With this statement being heard by everyone, they start commenting about the incident between the agencies, and Biam gets deeply irritated. Anyway, Siak says it is surprising to openly ask for a duel because in his mind, the young master was smarter with tactics and schemes. Faced with this, the man questions what the hero said. Then the protagonist says that the Wind Agency was difficult to face directly, so Biam was approaching Green Pine because they were easier. Faced with such an affront, the man asks Siak to measure his words, and the hero did not expect him to be so offended, saying it does not match someone of honor. At this moment, the looks of the two young masters meet in a tense and harsh atmosphere. Biam gets irritated because his plan to pick an easy opponent to show his skills failed, with Siak insisting on interfering again. Deciding to change his plans, the man calls the young master Jinho to have a private conversation. However, the hero knows that the man in front of him built his fame with the Habuk family, deciding now to completely destroy him to take all that fame for himself. Mockingly, Siak states it is beneficial to exchange ideas when the opponent is at least capable, but that does not seem to be the case with Biam, which makes him furious. Frankly, for the hero, the young master is not the type of opponent he seeks, so he suggests a duel by proxy. Not understanding what it is about, the man questions if the protagonist is thinking of asking for help from the Habuk Peng family again, which is denied. Instead, the young master of the Green Pine Agency will be responsible for dealing with Biam. The last day of the conference is the right time for the duel, but it will only happen if both agree. In an act of courage, the little boy shouts that he accepts going against his sister's order. Confidently, Biam asks if the hero is betting the Siak family's honor on the Green Pine Agency, also saying he has nothing to lose in the duel. In this case, the protagonist decides that they should then finish quickly and meet there on the last day. The young master of the White Demon in turn continues confidently, saying he will pray that none of them chicken out on the day. After concluding the discussion with an agreement, Biam leaves, mocking the proposal and thinking he would be even more grateful if the hero raised the stakes. With the young master gone, the girl questions what Siak is doing, as a duel between her brother and that man is too much for them. In view of this, Jinho apologizes if he caused any confusion, but asserts that considering the fight loss is underestimating the boy. The woman does not understand, and the hero explains that he does not bet his name on lost causes, being sure that the boy will win because he will make it happen. Inside a residence, the girl has no idea what the young master is thinking or why he specifically chose her brother. However, the boy is excited and embarrassed, clearly happy that someone believes in his potential. In this case, the girl shouts, asking if it is time to be happy, and the young master, explaining himself, states that despite everything, he will have the chance to learn from someone strong. The girl understands, also saying she heard the rumors, but they only spoke of the young master's exceptional martial skill, which is quite different from her brother's. Suddenly, someone approaches, asking if the chief of the Green Pine Agency is there, and when questioned, the man explains he was sent by Siak Jinho. The man introduces himself as Zhang Mariang and explains that his young master wishes to see them immediately. While walking towards Siak's room, the girl wonders what he wants with them. She speculates that she is being used to embarrass the White Demon, but dismisses it. That's because if that were the case, he could have accepted the duel directly, not needing someone like Jiun. Upon arrival, Marion points to the door, saying they can enter now. Inside, our hero, sitting in a chair, asks the members of Green Pine to also sit, as they have much to discuss. In a show of courtesy, the young master of the Green Pine Agency introduces himself along with Jiun, the agency's chief. In this case, the protagonist reciprocates, saying he is Siak Ji-hoon from the Siak family's mansion. Jiun apologizes for being impolite, but is curious to know why he decided to help them. Then the hero comments that the caution is understandable. However, the protagonist states there is a connection with the previous generation, and his actions are not out of kindness, but to repay a debt of gratitude from the previous generation. This was back when snow covered everything, and some steps were marked in the vast whiteness. The hero was lying on the ground, weaker than ever, barely surviving in the mountains at the peak of winter. His body was probably already colder than a corpse, buried under the snow, unable to move, just waiting for the next life. But suddenly, as if by a miracle, someone appeared, noticing someone lying in the snow and starting to prepare aid with a blanket, a fire, and heated water. The chief of the Green Pine Escort Agency at the time found the protagonist during his journey and saved his life when he was on the brink of death. In addition to care, he gave Seok food and water, and that selfless kindness remains the brightest and warmest memory in his countless lives. The hero's deceased mother always said she owed a lot to the escort agency's chief, and for a long time said it was a debt that needed to be repaid at all costs. However, being of humble origin, Seok found it difficult to repay this debt with money, so he decided to try to repay it with his humble skills. June starts to feel happy, understanding what will happen, and the hero says the boy is right, but that there is something he would like to ask first. The hero heard that the Green Pine Escort Agency was once one of the 10 great escort agencies and wonders what happened to it afterward. In light of this, the girl asks for permission to explain the whole story. As the young master mentioned, their agency was once one of the 10 great escort agencies of the Central Plains. But just as the White Demon Escort did with the Seok Wind Escort Agency, they allied with bandits to steal the goods they were protecting. Her father, the late chief at the time, fell while defending the goods from the bandits' attack. Furthermore, the girl's mother went to look for evidence at the incident site, but never returned. The protagonist always wondered why there was so much ferocity in the eyes of someone so young and now understands it is due to her past. In this case, he apologizes for making the girl recall such painful memories, and she says it is quite the opposite as it strengthened her determination. As far as he is concerned, Seok states that although there is a desire to share the pain, time is short, so he asks them to follow him. Walking around the palace grounds, the young master of Green Pine is impressed with everything. The hero notices the boy's defined muscles, and that his posture and movements are not bad, having overburdened his body, affecting his performance. But this means he got the determination to train to reach this point. Currently, Jun is just a first-class martial artist, but with the right training and guidance, he can become incredibly strong, definitely becoming capable of facing BM Wongang. In view of this, the protagonist wastes no time and commands them to start immediately. Like lightning, the hero disappears in an instant and lands a blow on the young master of Green Pine, making him groan in pain. The boy's reaction was not bad, but he is easily subdued. His movements are too rigid due to his muscles being overstrained from so much effort. At this moment, the boy's sister tries to interfere, but he tells her to stay back. He has just been given a chance to become stronger and will not give up. Then the girl realizes her mistake, apologizing for acting foolishly. Preparing to counterattack, the boy says it is now his turn to strike, and the hero simply asks him to do his best. Before Ji-yoon can attack, he receives another blow to his chest, followed by an elbow that lifts him off the ground. Finally, a kick to his back makes the boy fall face first onto the tiles. With the end of the battle, the protagonist leaves, saying it is enough for today. However, the boy insists he can continue, but CF explains that his body needs time to recover, and it is necessary not to be impatient. In view of this, the boy unexpectedly accepts the instructions without question, leaving the young master satisfied. The next day, the siblings gather in the same place to have a conversation. Ji-yoon tells his Nuna that he thought it was just his imagination, but he definitely feels something, and she questions what the boy means. Raising his fists, the boy comments that despite being struck yesterday, his shoulder somehow feels lighter along with the stabilized energy flow. Ji-yoon initially believed that the man was just hitting him skillfully to avoid leaving bruises, but this made her brother's body feel lighter. It is speculated that Seok did something to the boy similar to meridian cleansing. Then, without further ado, he arrives at the place, saying his student is early. Quickly, the two greet the protagonist cordially, and he responds in kind. Very happy, Ji-yoon informs that he slept more peacefully than ever, feeling very light, and questions about the meridian cleansing. However, the hero claims to have only relaxed his overstrained muscles and meridians, making the boy realize this is his normal condition. He asks the boy to make sure to let his body recover to this state at least once or twice a month because the body also needs rest to grow. The protagonist asks if the boy has a preferred sword technique to use, and he confirms he is currently learning one that was passed down by his family. In this case, CF gives a wooden sword to Junyoon to demonstrate his technique. Later at the palace, everything goes on normally with people walking up and down for the events. A man accompanies our hero, saying it is the first time he has seen the escort conference so lively, likely due to the duel happening that day. However, the protagonist states there is nothing to worry about, and the man agrees, saying he would even believe it if the young master claimed to be a fallen god. Anyway, since Seok asked to raise the stakes, they arrange a special place for the duel, and in this case, he's asked to go ahead. Seok, in turn, is confident and tells the man to just enjoy the show. Then the young Green Pine siblings finally arrive. The protagonist asks if the boy is ready, and honestly, he feels he can beat BM 6 times out of 10. Finally, the announcer tells the competitors to prepare as the special duel is about to begin. Then BM mocks the boy for not fleeing from their fight. He comments that he heard the former agency chief also met his end due to his recklessness. In such a case, Jun begins to prepare his battle stance, stating that whether it's recklessness or not will be clear after the duel. Marion, however, talks to his colleague asking if he is sure about the fight's outcome, as just by looking at their internal energy, a difference is evident. In response, Yoon explains there is no need to worry because the young master has already shown that true strength is not just about internal energy. That man gets irritated with the boy's exaggerated confidence, saying he is getting full of himself after joining the young master of the Siak family. Then Byum draws his sword and attacks, saying the boy should have realized earlier that no matter how many losers fight, it's still a waste of time. Witnessing his opponent's skills, Jun praises him in his mind, realizing he is not just a braggart. He dodges while thinking that what young Master Siak said was correct. Byum's moves are actually very predictable and can be easily read. Days ago, during one of his training sessions, the boy was struck by the hero and quickly fell to the ground. At that moment, he asked why none of his attacks hit, as the young master wasn't even using internal energy. Then the hero stated it is about where one looks, something really basic, and asked the boy where he was looking. Jun promptly replied that he was looking at his opponent, but the protagonist said he was wrong, explaining that the boy was keeping his eye on the tip of his sword. When questioned about the need to anticipate when the attack will come, Sif explained that when the sword tip moves, it's too late, especially when fighting someone powerful. Back in the present, Byum is already tired and angrily comments on the boy's strategy of dodging like a rat. In his thoughts, Jun knows that Wanggang might be better than him, but still, it is easy to see his movements after observing the young master for several days. The stance reveals where someone's center of gravity is, and the torso's movements indicate the direction of the next attack. When the force directs to the shoulders is a sign that the attack is approaching. This being the right time to act, the boy's eyes fill with determination, and he manages to land a blow on Byum's chest while the man still has his arms raised, making him feel despair for the first time in this fight. Wisely, after being injured, the martial artist retreats to a defensive position, but the young master of Green Pine continues his assaults. In view of this, Jun is impressed by her brother's skills, who has clearly become stronger in a short period. However, the hero states it is too early to rejoice as Byum has not yet used his full strength, this being just the beginning. In the midst of the battle, Byum looks back, encountering his master's furious expression. His master is silently reprimanding him in various ways. Then the man realizes this can't go on, for if he is defeated by someone weaker than Siuk, he can't even imagine what his father will say. With a sadistic expression, an aura begins to form around his sword, and Byum explains that until now, he was just giving the boy a chance. From that shining sword, the man launches an energy blast that destroys everything in its path. Quickly, it meets the boy, who barely manages to dodge. Then a frantic duel between the two ensues, with attacks and defenses executed perfectly. The battle intensifies with the warriors crossing their swords, and afterward, the young master of Green Pine retreats a few meters. At first, it seemed Jun was doing well in the battle, but as expected, his opponent was stronger than him. Indignant, Marion asked what they would do as they can't spend their lives fighting only the weakest, so they said the best option would be to flee. In a desperate act, the boy advances with his sword to try a thrust. About to attack, Jun thinks the man should not expect a unilateral victory. However, in a counterattack, Byum hits the boy's shoulder first, cutting his flesh and breaking his bones. Nevertheless, Jun shows resilience, giving up maintaining his body's condition and continuing his assault. He leaves his opponent completely confused and finally lands an elbow strike on Byum's jaw. After this blow, the man groans and falls to the ground, dropping his sword and starting to bleed. In this case, the boy walks away, saying that with this, the result is decided. However, the outcome of the battle is still not entirely clear to the White Demon Agency member, who becomes indignant about the situation. He knows that if the news spreads, he will become a laughingstock for everyone and can't let that happen. So Byum grabs his sword again, preparing a new attack to turn the tide of the match in his favor. Due to his innocence, Jun was not prepared for this, thus realizing his mistake. But without letting things get complicated, Sia quickly intervened in the duel, slamming Byum's face into the ground with his foot. It was a fact that everyone from that agency openly used dirty tricks, so after his interference, the hero extended his hand, commenting that the son was just like the father. The civilians, however, do not understand what happened, commenting that someone hit the man and some realize it was the young master who brought him down with just one blow. With the end of the battle, the elder of the White Demon demands that the young master be brought to him immediately. At this moment, he is more curious than ever, thinking he will make him regret everything that happened that day. The bastard of the Siak family is now definitely in the White Demon Agency's sights. As the confusion comes to an end, the man from before embraces the protagonist, saying he is his lucky charm. His colleagues also praise him, saying they are very proud, but in Siak's mind, this was not something to be overly proud of. Finally, Jun greets the hero and says he does not know how to repay this debt of gratitude. However, as Siak said, he is merely returning the kindness of the previous generation. Then the boys ask their savior to visit them when the agency is back. And so the conference ended without further issues and time passed normally. Suk Jinho also gradually got used to his new life and the people around him. And before he realized it, he was already celebrating his first birthday in his new body. After some time, the mansion master questions if his friend is really leaving. Then the protagonist asks if he hadn't made it clear to the elder, who comments disappointedly that the hero refuses to call him father. Seok states he thought the master would be busy, but he said that a father should know where his son is going since he had to leave everything to come here. Giving into the questioning, Seok informs him that he is going to the Yellow River in the Habuk province, a place that fortunately is not very far. In this case, the nanny is from Habuk, so the protagonist thought it would be too tiring for her to travel far. In such a case, the mansion elder gives Seok a birthday present, saying it will be useful to him now and asking him not to worry. To clarify, he states it is not a gift to pay off debts, so the hero decides to accept it with gratitude. He is asked what he plans to do when he reaches the Yellow River, and he explains he has no big plans, only thinking of starting a martial arts academy, one that would soon be called the Martial Academy of Celestial Ascension. Maryeong is delighted with the name that will be given to the young master's martial arts school. In this case, he is asked if he and Yoon will become martial arts instructors, and our hero explains that as long as they don't seek fame, they can be. In view of this, Maryeong tries to say they should stop calling him young master and start calling him director, but the cat hits him on the head. After this ruthless attack, Seok comments that Darky wanted to move the bags first, leaving the titles to be decided later. Suddenly, an employee informs the protagonist that the representative sent him a message, which surprises him. The representative said that no matter what he does, he will always need horses and carriages, and left him the horse and carriage he arrived in. Along with the best wishes for the Martial Academy of Celestial Ascension to prosper, this makes the young master show gratitude. In the end, that place was much better than the nanny had imagined. She comments that it is very nice to be near the sea, and that it seems to open her heart. Then Seok is happy that his nanny liked it, but informs her that they will be busy. While they take care of other things, the nanny will have to take care of the Martial Arts Academy along with the garden and the animals. With the commands established, the woman agrees, and the hero decides to leave a bag of money with her as well. He says he has much to do while handing the coins to the nanny, as she also deserves to handle the finances. Finally, the protagonist orders them to hurry and finish arranging everything so they can finally rest. Later, someone comments that they have never spent so much time at the market before. This is Yoon, who is surprised that they needed more things than he thought. Then Seok also comments with relief that the animals will be delivered the next day. At this moment, the nanny interrupts asking about dinner because everyone is hungry, and in that case, Seok says they will grab a snack before heading home. Smelling the fresh food wafting through the area, Maryeong tells the young master that the smell comes from the left side and is impossible to resist. Paying a bit of attention, everyone agrees, and despite being a slightly rundown place, it is tempting enough for them to try it. Upon entering the establishment, it seems a fight is going on between some adults and a pair of boys. Quickly, Maryeong shouts indignantly, asking what the men did to the children, and intervening, the young master asks them to give space. Seok calmly explains that they came for a peaceful meal, but apparently chose the wrong time. The hostile men understand they are guests and agree to give them space. Approaching the hero, their leader comments that given their burden, they don't seem to be just travelers, questioning if it is their first time there. Understanding he is a new resident of the neighborhood, the man suggests they introduce themselves, starting by saying he is Oh Chun-gel from Red Cliff. The protagonist in turn says he is Seok Jin-ho, the director of the Celestial Ascension Martial Academy. In this case, the man understands he is a warrior, and Seok comments that if there's nothing more, they would appreciate it if they could clear the way. Seemingly returning to normal, the establishment owner calls his staff to work, saying his boss needs to make every cent count. Seok asks the boys if the food is ready, and they respond with trembling voices that it is, and ask the group to sit down. The girl asks if she should serve 4 bowls of noodles, to which she is told to also add some meat for the cat. After the situation calms down, Seok discreetly calls Maryeong, questioning if he will intervene every time something like this happens. With his attention called, Maryeong quickly understands his mistake. Seok admires his companion's chivalry, but explains that when one draws a sword, things can get out of control. So if they had expelled the troublemakers, it would return for revenge on the siblings, remaining the responsibility of the one who got involved in the conflict. Maryeong regrets it, and Seok says he is not telling him to endure every time something happens, because if that were his style, he wouldn't have taught him martial arts. But again, it is informed that if one is to act, it must be with conviction, ensuring no regrets later. Finally, both Maryeong and Yoon accept their master's instructions. Furthermore, the hero recalls that he mentioned his name, so things will stay calm for a while, with the troublemakers not showing their true intentions. Faced with such premeditated planning, the students can only appreciate their master's expertise. Shortly after, the girl arrives at the table with 4 portions of noodles and the requested meat for the cat. The nanny, in turn, is surprised, saying it is incredible to see someone with so much skill at the girl's age. After taking the first bite of the food, everyone, without exception, is shocked by the immense flavor. A bit embarrassed, the girl explains that her grandmother is the real cook, but she hasn't been to the restaurant lately due to a health problem. The entire group praises the food while eating non-stop, and Seok promises to definitely return when the girl's grandmother recovers. Returning to the previous subject, the protagonist asks about the thugs, and the girl explains that they lived on the street and took out a loan to open the restaurant. Distressed, the girl explains that since her grandmother got sick and they took a break, they have been a bit short on the month's expenses. However, she smiles, saying she shouldn't bother her guests with these stories, and decides to leave. While eating, the protagonist understands is a young pair of siblings and a sick grandmother, and that the place is simple, but the food is good enough to attract attention. It is likely that the men want to use the debt to take over the business, and then, even after taking it, will say the debt was not paid, making the children work forever. They only press enough to keep the victims alive. That is how these guys operate, and for now, the hero can only watch how things unfold. Later, in another place, a large wave of water approaches. Yude is in his training dedicated to making the best punch possible. Unexpectedly, his punch manages to pierce the wave in the middle, creating a centrifugal system. In contrast to the boy's feat, it is Miryang's turn to try to do the same. However, he is not as skilled as his colleague, as being overwhelmed by the wave. Quickly, it starts to engulf him entirely, making him begin to drown. Yoon then saves his friend, and Miryang tries to explain that balancing on the sand is super difficult. Seok, however, explains that this is part of the training, and there is no better way to strengthen the legs than training on the beach. And even so, for a first training session, it is said that the man did not do badly, making him feel an undeserved happiness. Changing the subject, the hero calls the two to go check the fish traps. Arriving at the location, the young master is asked if it is really right for them to just do what they are told. In this case, Seok questions what else the man will do when he has no official responsibility, and Miryang just believes that his duties are too light. In response, the protagonist simply tells them to focus on their own tasks because his work is not something they could handle. Finally, Seok bids farewell to his group, scheduling a meeting with everyone in the evening. The hero thinks that now that the matters within the martial arts academy are calmer, it is time to start taking care of external matters. In a meditative position, he believes they probably have a reasonable amount of money, but is still not enough to live peacefully forever. Furthermore, it is a fact that it is not easy to start making money with the martial arts academy right away. To make the academy grow, a lot of preparatory work is needed, which is why the hero gave tasks to the 3 group members. In this case, until the academy can sustain itself, they will need to earn extra income. He chose the Yellow River as his location precisely for this reason. Diving into the river, the protagonist thinks there are some spiritual creatures there that, when eaten, can increase someone's energy and are worth a lot of money. In the river, the most common creatures are the 50-year-old purple oysters. In addition to them, there are also some 100-year-old ones, but finding the older ones requires a lot of luck. Suddenly, underwater, something catches the protagonist's attention. Finally, he finds an oyster that is different from the others he has seen so far. It is quite clever, sensing the presence of the approaching man. In view of this, it tries to move, but our hero would not let it escape. Quickly, he swam towards the oyster, grabbing its shell. Holding it in his hands, the hero notes that by its color, it must be less than 1,000 years old, being something around 500. With this, it is already possible to complete a stage of the transformation. After emerging from the water, even while wet, the protagonist sits on the ground and prepares to open the oyster with his hands. Due to the difficulty of opening that oyster, Seok realizes it will not give up without a fight. In this case, the protagonist begins to release his aura, saying it is a pity it encountered someone like him. Then, with overwhelming strength, the hero finally manages to open it. The oyster's effort was commendable to Seok, but from the moment it faced him, its fate was sealed. Removing the pearl from the animal, Seok holds it, thinking that being 500 years old, it must have already absorbed spiritual energy. He then ingests it, thus beginning his cultivation meditation. At the moment, Seok's feeling is like the sea before the storm, wild, uncontrollable, agitated with strong and fierce waves, but still calm. And he begins to attract the true chi of the celestial thunder divine art of chaotic origin to his own chi center. And as the energy of the inner pill passes through the 8 extraordinary meridians and circulates through the 3 main meridians of the body, the ki of the celestial thunder of chaotic origin, after absorbing the energy of the inner pill, begins to pulse through the conception and governor vessels, increasing 10 times, 100 times, until finally breaking the final barrier, which finally completes the transformation. With the end of his cultivation, our hero is sweaty and comments that it has been at least 2 hours. Happily, Seok understands that he is different now, having already recovered half of his abilities. Moreover, even with his low internal energy, he has time to recover. Back at the residence, the place is extremely clean, even shining. Promptly, Miryang welcomes the director, commenting that he arrived late that day. In view of this, the protagonist agrees he is late, and the nanny explains that the sea at night can be dangerous, advising him not to stay there too late. Holding the hero's basket, Miryang asks about the oysters, saying he has never seen such a large one, and the young master asks for it to be prepared for dinner. The man then understands the command, and the nanny offers to get some sides to go with it. Not forgetting Darky, the hero also gives an oyster to his cat. Darky tries hard but can't open it, and Seok, noticing the animal's difficulty, suggests that he use internal energy. In this case, now using its inner power, the cat manages to break the shell and proudly shows its power to its master. After some time, the director is informed that everything is ready and he says he is on his way. The oysters are already on the grill and everyone can smell the wonderful aroma. Marion in turn questions why this oyster is so delicious, saying he has been to many popular places lately but never tasted anything like this. Then the hero states it is not a normal oyster, and Yoon, picking one up, agrees it is strange to see one so big and shares that when he ate it, he felt warmth in his stomach. Marion tells his colleague that he is also feeling this, and the two get excited due to this warmth coming from within their bodies. In this case, the protagonist explains that after they finish eating, they should go in and circulate their kai to know for sure. Everyone gets excited, but Sik explains it is not what they are thinking. These oysters are at least 50 years old and should have some effect. Hearing that conversation, the nanny asks if the ones Sik left in the yard are for the young master to eat, and he says they are for something else. It is said that the boy is thinking of starting a business, and in that case, a woman asks if the hero will sell them personally. He then asks why he would do that when there are people who can sell much better than he can. Later, at the young master's residence, Yoon and Marion train as usual, while the nanny takes care of feeding the animals. Upon arriving at the place, Seok cheerfully comments that everyone woke up early today. Then he goes to the nanny and asks if she is feeling better after the previous day's food, which she confirms without hesitation. Inevitably, as the hero personally helped her channel the energy through a massage, she probably absorbed it better than the two warriors. Changing the subject, the woman comments about the guest they are expecting, and Yoon asks about the identity of this person. Exactly when the guest is mentioned, they arrive at the sound of galloping horses. In view of this, one of the carriage servants steps forward, informing that the young lady has arrived. He helps her down, and the girl asks if everything is okay with her dear little brother. Seok greets her calmly but asks if his sister had any trouble getting there. She then says it was not a long trip, but since this is not the Seok family mansion, she believes they could talk more peacefully. In this case, a protagonist uses a dialect to refer to his sister respectfully. In response, the girl gets irritated, saying she is not old enough to deserve that, and asks to be called Nuna. While walking, she asks why the hero suddenly sought her out, explaining that although it was nice to receive her brother's first letter, the question remains. She asks if he is missing his sister after moving, but Seok says it is not that. He explains he just wants to talk about some business with his dear sister. The hero's sister questions about the place, asking if her brother is giving her a tour of the house before talking, and he explains that he will show the goods. In this case, she asks if the goods are really there, and the protagonist asks her to see for herself, showing her the immense oyster stored in a wooden barrel. In view of this, the girl is shocked, and Seok informs her that it is exactly what she thinks. Holding the animal in her hands, she is told it is a 100-year-old red mollusk. Faced with this explanation, the girl is even more surprised that her brother managed to catch something like that. Even experienced fishermen who spend decades at sea and martial artists who use their skills can only find 50 or 70-year-old ones. Moreover, it is said that finding a 100-year-old purple mollusk or a 100-year-old red mollusk requires a once-in-a-lifetime stroke of luck. Seok, in turn, simply confirms he caught it alone, saying that is why he wants to make a deal, although it was not easy for him either. Anyway, the protagonist explains that he wants to sell through his sister, but obviously will be asking for the full price, not being a fool to bargain. With such a rare item in front of her, the girl cannot resist asking a question, and the hero says he will answer everything except how he obtained it. Unexpectedly, the woman asks if it is possible to find an even rarer one, like a 1,000-year-old purple mollusk. Thus, the girl offers an exclusive contract with her brother, paying a premium above the market rate, and in return, he will distribute all valuable items through her. In this case, Seok cannot guarantee that he will always have the maximum number possible because he prefers that they do not become too common in the market, to which the girl agrees. However, when a merchant is willing to pay more, it makes him think about the context, asking the girl if she knows of anyone looking for one of these. However, the girl decides to skip that question, even though she knows her brother could find out for himself if he focused on it. Finally, it is time to discuss the duration of the contract and the price. First, it is said that the creatures are worth whatever price someone is willing to pay. Later, the hero asks if the girl will stay for dinner, and she explains that she paid a hefty amount for the goods and needs to sell them as soon as possible. However, this was clearly a drama because the girl made deals knowing she would profit, so she left with a smile, saying she was looking forward to the business. Finally, the girl's carriage leaves, and Mariang is indignant that she left without dinner, but the hero explains that it is due to her excitement. Moreover, with the distribution rights for the 100-year-old red mollusks, this will become a game-changer in the succession battle. Without further ado, the nanny asks if she should prepare the meal immediately, and realizing it was late, they decided to eat out at the same place as before, where they enjoyed that delicious noodle. As these days have been quite tiring because of the guest, everyone agrees without hesitation, happily heading to the establishment. However, upon arriving at the place, unexpectedly, the restaurant is closed. This is very common due to the hour, so the nanny asks if it is because of the main cook's illness. and Marion hopes it is not because of the thugs, but Yoon opines that if that were the case, the place would be in turmoil. After a worker passes by carrying pieces of wood, the protagonist calls his attention, asking if he knows why the restaurant is closed. In response, the man comments that the owners are probably still at the cemetery. When asked about it, he explains that their sick grandmother recently passed away, so the previous day some nearby merchants went to help at the funeral. Being something very sad, Seok asks where the cemetery is, and he is informed that it is not far, near the mountain's entrance. After being informed, all the group members head towards the location. However, something catches the hero's attention, making him come up with a flimsy excuse to separate from his colleagues. They question why they have to go back, but Seok decides not to explain, and they understand it is not the time to ask questions. Then Yoon, who understood first what is happening, leads the two away while commenting that the pigs must already be hungry. Seok feels proud of this student, but realizes that Mariang still cannot grasp things quickly. But regardless of anything, there was no need to expose the nanny to such unpleasant scenes. In the middle of the forest, a voice is heard commenting on the non-transfer of the restaurant along with the lack of payment of the debt. In such a case, the man questions if the kids are looking for their own death, and the boy stands in front of his sister. He states that it would be impossible to raise such a large sum in just one night, but the thug says that is not his problem. The girl in turn cries and says that no matter how good money is, the man still has no right to say that to them at a time like this. She screams, reminding them that their grandmother just passed away and that the thugs are bothering them at her funeral. Finally, she asks if the mercenaries are afraid of the members of the Celestial Ascension Martial Academy, making the man deeply irritated. Furious, the thug raises his arm to hit the girl's face, and she, in desperation, takes refuge in the comfort of her brother's arms. However, at the moment the assault is about to happen, the protagonist appears from behind, holding the man's arm with a serious expression. Realizing who is in front of him, the boy comments to his sister that the director of the Celestial Ascension Martial Academy is there. At this moment, Seok asks if the two were hurt anywhere or had anything taken from them, and they say no. In this case, the hero tells the two to do as he commands, covering the girl's ears and blocking her eyes so she cannot see anything. Still holding the thug's arm, Seok is furious, and the boy initially does not understand. However, Seok reiterates that his orders be carried out quickly. With the thug's forearm in his hands, the hero squeezes even harder, making him scream in pain. In response, the protagonist asks if there is anyone among the two thugs who is brave and reckless enough to risk themselves for their colleague. Inevitably, the two remain paralyzed, already aware of the hero's true identity. In desperation, the man yells at his companions, questioning if they believe the rumors enough to just stand there while their boss is subdued. In this case, Seok strikes the thug's neck in two specific places. In a flash, a hero finds the man's pressure points, thus demonstrating the truth of the rumors. After this, he explains that the bravest of the three has been taken down, so now the remaining cowards are ordered to spread his message as he dictates. In his message, Seok compares the boss to insects that, no matter how many you kill, new ones always appear, which is why they had no problems initially. However, he says that if the boss insists on behaving this way, the story will be different because pests like him continue to wander and should be exterminated. That is why this message is directed to the bandit boss and everyone following the evil path in the Yellow River region. In this case, Seok, with a frightening appearance, states that if they do not want to be crushed to death, they had better at least pretend to be normal human beings. Finally, with the thugs understanding the message, they are ordered to disappear immediately. Desperate, they run away, understanding that the hero is not someone they can deal with. After all that confusion, the protagonist sighs in exhaustion. He asks the older brother to cover his sister's eyes and follow him, making sure not to look at the ground if possible. The three pass by the thug's corpse, trying to ignore it to maintain the children's sanity. The girl, in turn, asks how long she needs to continue like this, so her brother comforts her, saying it will be just a little longer. With this, the director finally allows the girl to open her eyes. In response, the two thank Seok for everything, but he questions the reason for the gratitude, also asking if they have finished the funeral. Thanks to the director, they are informed that they managed to do it correctly, thanking him again for his contribution. In this case, the hero asks the two to follow him, and they end up having dinner with the whole group. With a smile, the nanny appears, informing them that the preparations are ready. Somewhat embarrassed, Seok apologizes for making the girl cook even during her rest period, but she says she likes watching them eat enthusiastically. Thus, with everyone starving, it is finally time to enjoy a good meal. The girl's brother, in turn, asks her to try using chopsticks, and she says she can manage. Despite being a happy moment, the nanny feels sad for the young people's situation. Breaking the ice, Seok asks the boy if he plans to keep the restaurant open, and he explains that for now, it is his only way to make a living. In this case, the hero asks if the boy would like to work with them there. His sister Seol can help the nanny, and Kang can do the work that Yoon and Mariam are doing. This leaves the boy confused, and the nanny agrees, saying she needs someone to help her anyway and explaining that it is hard to find someone so diligent. In view of this, Mariam comments that the work of the two would already be justified just for having the noodles, and Yoon says that Kang seems to be a strong boy. Seok, in turn adds that it is difficult to manage a restaurant with 2 people, and besides, it is not suitable to hire young people as workers. So the hero asks them to work there to gain some experience, and when they are ready to go on their own, they can leave at any time. However, the boy already feels quite indebted for the kindness received that day, and the protagonist explains that he is not offering it out of mere generosity. Indeed, they need extra hands, and the 2 young people apparently are honest people, making them perfect candidates for the job. Kang, in turn, thinks they could have the restaurant, but as the director pointed out, they lack experience, and besides, he now has to protect his sister with his limited strength. In view of this, if the director had not appeared, he would not know what would have happened, and working there, they would definitely be in good hands. After thinking for a bit, even considering learning martial arts to protect Seal, the boy stands up abruptly. Bowing, he states that he has already decided and promises to work with all his effort, asking to be taken along with his sister. Sega asks if the children will make this decision without asking about payment, reminding them that he just advised them to weigh the pros and cons. However, Kang says he has already thought about it and believes he could learn things more valuable than money there, so the salary would become less important. In this case, the hero asks if this means the boy agrees to work for nothing, to which he nervously replies yes. However, Kang then says he is joking and explains that the nanny will handle the salaries since they will be working with her most of the time. With that said, it is now time to eat before the food gets cold, considering that Nanny worked hard to prepare the meal. At nightfall, a conversation takes place inside the sleepless pavilion. While eating a piece of chicken, a man asks if everything is there. Continuing, he questions with a smile if Mahjong Chill of Red Cliff really backed down. This is the 1000th leader of the Golden Prescription, Jun Chalong. Another man promptly explains that he heard he was let go with all the wealth he accumulated. This is the leader of the Black Ghost sect, the feared Blood Ghost. Jun comments that after all, that man is just a merchant wanting to play with money, and the Blood Ghost asks to skip the unnecessary conversation. An elder then questions if everyone is aware of the reason they have gathered there. From the Sleepless Pavilion, this is the owner of the place known as Huano. He assumes that his colleagues have conducted investigations regarding the Celestial Ascension Martial Academy, explaining the unusual silence in recent days. However, it is questioned if their patience is reaching its limit now. Even so, the Blood Ghost asks what they can do about it, because even though he's a bastard son, he still belongs to the Siak family mansion. Jum adds, asking his colleagues to remember how Jinho dealt with Ochun of the Red Cliff sect, explaining that even if they win, it will be difficult to handle the Siak family's wrath. Huano, in turn, did not expect the chief of the 1000 Goals to have such a naive thought, so Jun questions if there really is another way. Without hesitation, the elders suggest they handle the problem with their own hands, recalling a popular saying that one should kill someone with a borrowed knife. Huano comments that they can make someone take the blame as long as they have enough money in hand. In response to this smile, the Blood Ghost realizes that the elder wants to place the blame on the White Demon's agency, with whom they are not well related. While drinking his tea, he says that the assassins of the Life and Death sect are competent, but it will cost a hefty amount to send the best. As far as he is concerned, Huano explains that at the age of their targets, they will not have reached a skill level that surpasses that of the Dark Assassins. Then, with a snap of his fingers, he calls for his servant, who approaches carrying a scroll and a pen. Thus, everyone there decides to reach a consensus to sign an oath, and Huano, demonstrating his malicious intentions, comments that they need protections to stay united. Thus, they finalize by putting all the clauses into effect with the writing of the document. Our video ends here. If you liked it, leave your like and subscribe. See you next time.